Okay, today's topic is the cycle of abuse. This is a well known theory of how abusive relationships work, and it is a cycle. It goes through four stages. It basically ends with a major physical or verbal assault, and that tends to diffuse the tension that is built up. So the fourth stage is the actual abuse. The third stage, so I'm going sort of backwards here, what leads up to this is a tension building phase. Before the tension building phase, building up to this big explosive outburst, is a honeymoon phase where everything is wonderful. And that is the second stage. So is it three or four? Oh, hell. Anyway, that's what happens. You have a major fight, then you have a honeymoon stage after the fight where it's almost like it didn't happen. Everyone doesn't talk about what happened, and everything is beautiful. And then you start feeling like, oh, I don't know, I don't feel good. And then it's a leading up to building of tensions in this stage here, the third stage. And the fourth stage is the actual verbal or physical assault. And it keeps going around and around and around and around and around. Well, you can get all that information from various sources on the internet, and counselors, I'm sure, will use it. Um, what can I tell you that these other counselors don't tell you? Hmm. Is there anyone on the planet who hasn't experienced the cycle of abuse? Is there any child on the planet who hasn't seen this abusive relationship either in their family or in a neighboring family? Not that I'm aware of. Not that I'm aware of. So I'm sure everyone has experienced this kind of thing. And how do we break the cycle of abuse? Well, you have to know about it. And sometimes the ones who are in abusive relationships are impossible to educate on the cycle of abuse because they just are. They're completely self absorbed in their own world. And you could throw the book at them and bang them on the head like this, and they wouldn't pick up the book. They wouldn't pick up the book. You could get a loudspeaker, like on top of a cop car, and you could go and talk in the cop car microphone and explain the cycle of abuse to them. It would go in one ear and out the other. Someone wants to know why. Why? Because they don't understand. No, they could understand. They don't want to listen because they don't see it as a problem. It's not my problem. I don't have this problem. Yes, you do. I see it. You could video record. I'm not going to watch your videotape. It's denial. People are deeply in denial that this is what's going on. How do you break through denial? Rock bottom. Rock bottom. It's happened in my community this past week. A well-known former councilman on city council shot his cat and his wife. The man was an elder in a church in town. How long had the cycle of abuse been going on for? I don't know. The man's probably 80 years old. 80 years of cycle of abuse leading up to the shooting of his cat and his wife. If you really understand the cycle of abuse is endemic among humans, you will come to see it's an ego problem. It's all ego problem. Are there any problems on the planet that aren't related to ego? No. Ego is the number one public enemy, number one. Ego. Ego, ego, ego. Ego is the cause, the root cause of all evil on the planet. Everything is rooted in ego. So a lot of times on this channel, I talk about various evils. The evil of capitalism. The evil of capitalism is basically an ego problem where, well, it's always about me. I deserve all kinds of recognition and money, and no one else ever contributed anything to my success. So, and this is what the billionaires feel like. They've used the capitalist system to become billionaires, and then you become like Jeffrey Epstein, above the law, and next thing you know, you're kidnapping children to make them your sex slaves. Prince Andrew, anyone? I mean, above the law because you're a prince, a billionaire, and a prince. And you hang out with Jeffrey Epstein. Ego. Just because you're a prince doesn't mean you don't have an ego. And egos are driven by need for control and everything else that follows from control. Ego is primarily about control, controlling others, so that your ego gets what it needs. Sex, money, and power, primarily. And power is basically to be used whatever your whim is. It doesn't have to be rational. It doesn't have to be for the good of anyone. It doesn't have to be for the good of you. Look at alcoholics. Their ego wants to drink. It's the ego that has the disease of alcoholism. The body doesn't. The body doesn't crave the alcohol. The body gets sick, horrible hangovers. It's the ego that wants the alcohol. The ego is, well, the only way you get rid of it is you have to surrender it. You have to surrender it to higher power. Everyone knows the 12 steps of Alcoholics Anonymous. It's the same thing for even if you're not an alcoholic, but you have an ego and you're on the planet. You have to surrender your ego, your need for control over yourself, control over others. Why over yourself? Because if you're controlling yourself, well, you are not the one who's supposed to be in control. Higher power is supposed to be in control. So you have to surrender. Why? Because the human mind doesn't know anything. Everyone knows this. The human mind only knows what it knows from its own experience. And its own experience is everything on planet Earth that it learned from its parents and teachers and neighbors and friends. So it doesn't learn anything useful because the planet is in shambles, because that's the way everything is. If you want the experience of higher power, you have to connect to it by meditating. And then questioning all of your attitudes and beliefs, because they all come from the egoic people before you who taught you these things, or you absorb by osmosis. So, and it's not good enough for you to surrender your ego and connect to higher power, because all the other people around you haven't. And their egos are going to keep bopping into you. So you're going to have to learn to set a big boundary. And if you cross my boundary with your egoic needs, well, what is your reaction going to be? If you connect to higher power and meditate every day, it'll come automatically, and higher power will do it for you. You don't have to think about it. You just meditate, meditate, meditate. And when you get involved with egoic people, it'll just be automatic. You might find that your body runs away, or maybe it turns around and glares at the other person, or yells at them, or something else that I haven't mentioned. But how do you know it's not your ego? Because you meditated and meditated and meditated and meditated. And to yourself, you say, all by myself, I can't do it. I need help. I need help from higher power. Maybe someone calls it God. Some other people these days are calling it source. But whatever it is, it's beyond my little human mind to figure it out. I can't do it. So I'm going to meditate for an hour a day, and I'm going to be well aware of the cycle of abuse, and I'm going to read up about ways of getting rid of your ego and the ways that the ego will present itself to you. I will learn not to be a people pleaser. I will learn to set boundaries. And I will remember in kindergarten, they taught us to be kind to one another. So I will be kind as much as I can be. That's my intention. And if I find I'm not kind, I will say, well, why weren't you kind there? And if I don't have a good answer, I'm going to meditate on it. So if someone walked by me and say, hey, do you have a spare cigarette? And I say no, I'm going to ask myself why I said no. I meditate all the time, and I don't think about these things. Shouldn't I think about them? Well, it's a long time ago. The thinking mind left. So what happened was the higher wisdom knew this person. I knew this person was a never-do-well. In other words, this person wouldn't, if you asked them for a cigarette, they wouldn't give you one. So it's basically karma, instant karma for this person. That's what happens if you meditate a lot and you surrender your ego to higher power. You will be used by the higher power for higher power. And the higher power's goal on the planet is to get rid of ego. So it might mean that it's going to use you as another apparent ego, even though you have no ego, because you never really, well, you did. At one time you thought about how horrible it was, and you surrendered yourself and said, use me, higher power. Use me. I'll be a clear channel for you, higher power. And sometimes does it appear like you're an ego? Sometimes it appears like I'm a jackass. Nevertheless, I am a jackass in service of the higher power. No one will know that unless they watch this video. And even then, they're going to go, I don't believe it. But you better believe it. Because some of those people who apparently are personalities running around in meat suits that we call human bodies have surrendered their egos, and it doesn't mean they're going to turn over for you and be an easy target. Because that ain't going to teach you to drop your ego. They might just turn out to be the strongest, toughest son of a bitch you ever met. And it's because the higher power is way more powerful than any little human ego. I'm Harry Weaver, and that's your update.